Okay, so thanks for joining me this afternoon. This is the set that I'll be using today. It's the Cherry Blossom Edgecutz. It's a stamp and die set, so it's one that was released quite a while ago now. I can't remember when exactly, but there was a couple of others in this range also. Excuse me. With different flowers. So I thought it would be really nice just to revisit this and show you how to shape a card actually in the similar way that I've been doing the past couple of lives that I've been doing, but the stamps, the dies that I've been using haven't been specifically designed as an edge cut die. This one has, so this will shape your card a lot simpler than what I've been showing you the past couple of weeks. But obviously you still got that fabulous effect. And there's a couple of different finishes to this card. I haven't stuck this one down. There's a couple of different things that I'll do and we can sort of jazz it up along the way. And there's a couple of techniques that I'll show you on how I added the different layers. So as I say, this set comes with 3 dies, 2 of which cut out the larger cherry blossom sprig. And those 2 dies look like this. It basically cuts out this whole cherry die, but the die is in 2 pieces, and this is what allows you to cut on the edge to shape a card or shape a piece of cardstock to go on the top. The second part, once you've lined it up, it actually gives you the embellishment to go on the top. But if you take just one half of the die, or sort of one of the dies, it actually gives you that shaped element for your card blank. It doesn't have to be a card blank, as I say, it could just be a layer on your card, which you put directly onto the front of a card blank, but it does give you that option. Now the beauty of this set also is that it does come with the stamp, so you can make a complete card project with it. And what I've done here, as I say, I haven't stamped this together or attached this together. I should do a couple of backgrounds for you. Now this background, which is on the inside of the card, is stamped with this stamp. So I'll show you how to do that. And it's also inked up with Lisa's interference inks. And you won't be able to see it on the camera here, but there is just a very slight hint of that mica, of that special quality that's sitting in those interference ink pads. You can just about see that in there. Now I won't be able to show you that on camera purely because of the fine lines and the detail that is sitting on the ink. If that was a larger area of ink, then obviously you would be able to see that. And all I've done is just matted and laid that and put that on the inside of the card blank. And I think the beauty of having these edge cuts is it allows you to just see what's happened on the inside. Now, because I've shaped this card blank and you've actually got the die to do that this time, which makes it a lot easier, you've also got the option to shape your card blank at any stage along your card blank. Now, you'd be sort of forgiven for it when you immediately try this to actually shape your card blank. So we leave a lot more of the card blank on the front, so you just have this tiny amount of the inside peeping through. But because you do have this die, it makes it a lot easier. You can cut the front of your card blank anywhere along, and it just gives you that different look. If you wanted to, you could really take that close up to the spine of your of the front of the card and give you a completely different look altogether. So that is the beauty of using these, and if you have a couple of the other sets, maybe it might be worth trying. And also this works on any shape card. I'm using a square card and I'm not using any measurements. I'll show you the way that I've made the different layers. It really is just using a pencil mark and taking it to the trimmer. So I don't need you to give you specifics for this card that I'm making. You can adapt it really quite simply to the card shape, and it would work on a rectangle card, so some of your C6 cards, your 5 by 7 cards also. So yeah, so that's one background that I want to show you there. This is all on Lisa's super smooth card. Now I did make a second card. This is done in exactly the same way, completely different colours, so it looks completely different. This, however, the cherry blossom this time is stamped onto a watercolour card or a mixed media card, and I've actually used the ink from the stamped image to colour it in. Now I really like this look with the white on the blue. I think it's just a really fresh look. And what I've used the interference inks again. This time I've used the sapphire gold shimmer stamped onto the watercolour card, and I've pulled the ink from the stamped image into the detail there and actually coloured the image that way. I've only just sort of highlight detailed and coloured just to add a little bit of contrast between the flowers and the stems. And again, you possibly won't see this on the camera, but because I've pulled that ink in and we have a larger block of colour, you can see the mica sitting in those watercoloured areas. And if I get a chance, I will show you that also, because that is a really simple way to colour. And I think, and as well as showing you how the edge cuts come about, I think what this live will also show you is not to be frightened of a detailed stamp and colouring. Also, we have a fabulous new design team member in the group, Leanne. You may have seen her designs in the group, and she's amazing at watercolouring, really brings the images to life, but it can scare a lot of people, and I'm not a watercolour artist at all. I like to have a go on the days that I'm feeling brave, but whether you use this technique where you're using watercolour tools, you're using like a water brush, and you're using inks, again, this is Lisa's and it is available on the website in a pack of, I think it's 6. Yeah, you're not having to rely on the precise detail. This is stamped with Lisa's Cloud9 solid black ink, and I've used alcohol markers. I actually use Copics, and I've chosen a colour that fits the background that I've used. And instead of actually colouring the image and worrying whether I'm getting the right detail in the right place and am I blending out, I've just used the one ink, the one pen, and I've actually coloured behind the flower. So I'm not having to do any shading, and the image or the flowers really pop because I've given it the pink background. So that's a really nice way also to colour it, and a non-scary way. So hopefully I'll get round to showing you that also. So let's get going. I'll show you this background as well. Again, this is on Lisa's super smooth card, and it's just a stenciled image. It's from one of Lisa's art stencils. Oh, I think available individually now. They were available as a set, but I think you can buy them individually on the website. Actually, just before I move this one as well, I'll show you how we create this layer. But you can actually see that I've used a glitter card here. It's one of Lisa's Euphoria glitter cards. And these dies, although they look small and really quite delicate, they are more than capable of cutting through Lisa's glitter die card, which is slightly heavier than the normal cardstock. So don't be fooled by how dainty and delicate the dies look. They really do work hard for you. Okay, so what I wanted to show you really, and this technique will actually fall into how you die cut your card blank also. I want to show you how to create this layer on the front. So obviously we take our die, and you can see that that sits. So we take our right hand of the die, right, and we put that on the card blank there that we've already cut. So we get the orientation of how this die sits. Now, when you cut yourself a piece of card that you want to layer on the top here, give yourself a bit of wiggle room. Don't cut it exactly to size at this stage, because the nature of what you're doing means you can just trim it up a little bit slightly. And as I say, I'm not working to exact sizes here, but as long as the height is the same as your card blank, you should be going fine. And obviously the width is enough to give you a bit of space to move there. So the way that I found was easiest to do this, because obviously if I'm sitting this on top, I want what I die cut here to match up with what I've already done there. You can probably die cut the two together. That's not something that I usually do, because my brain only works one step at a time actually when I'm sort of trying to devise these cards. So it's not until I get to the stage to think, oh, I could have perhaps done two layers together. But I'll show you this way, which is the trickiest way, I suppose. So I'm lining up the die to what I've already die cut there, and I just slide in actually the cardstock that I want to cut. I'm holding this in place, and I'm making sure that this piece of card is lined up where I would want it on my card front. And all I do is just slide this along. It really is as simple as that. So I'm hoping that the orientation that I had it sitting against, lined up on the card blank, is now the same as on the card, the piece of cardstock here. So I get myself some low tack tape, and I can just attach that into position so I know that that's not going to go anywhere. And make sure that when you attach your tape, you're putting the majority of the tape on the side of the card that you're going to throw away, that you're not going to use, because although it says low tack tape, sometimes it does just catch a little bit and just might pull your card, and you really don't want the best part of your image to be spoiled there. So I'm just going to move that to one side, close that up, and I will die cut this in real time again for you, just to show you just how simple it is. So I bring in my die cutting machine, and we can die cut that. And in a second I will actually use the two dies together, because using these dies actually does involve needing a little pair of scissors just to snip. Now, depending on the card size that you're using, you may have one that is just the right height for this die, but obviously what I'm using, you know, I need to snip the excess off. I've taken to using larger scissors here, mainly because they don't have a serrated edge and it leaves the cardstock nice and smooth. And all I'm just doing is just slicing up from the bottom of the card to where it's die cut in a straight, the straighter line as I can manage. So you'd have your preferred way of doing this, whichever way you're comfortable doing. So I'll just make them little snips. So we have our die cut there, which matches up exactly. Now imagine if this was a card blank, you'd have the fold of your card here which would come round. So obviously when you're putting that through the die cutting machine, you'd open up your card blank like so and just run that through. So that is exactly the same, and possibly a lot simpler than what I've shown you the past couple of weeks. Now I want to create a layer on top. Maybe you don't want something as sparkly as this, or you want a matte layer on the outside, the same as you do on the inside. Line that up. I'm going to take a pencil, just something to make a mark, and I want this layer to be the same as this smaller mat on the inside. So all I'm going to do is just make a mark there and make a mark there in line with the height of this first mat and layer. So it really is no more complicated than that. And then I take my trimmer, so you have your preferred way of cutting your cardstock, and I'm just lining it up to the pencil mark that I made here, and just slicing that down. And then I just make sure that that's working. I do a lot of to-ing and fro-ing, but I know that it works for me this way. And once I put that on there, we can see that we have a nice matte layer. So now you can see the advantage of having this too long. It gives you just that little bit of wiggle room, and we can just make another mark here so we can create our little border down the spine of the card, and then I cut that. And this is how I do most of my mats and layers, I must admit. In all the years that I have been crafting, I have tried measuring precisely, and sometimes I do sometimes use the grids on the cutters, on the trimmers. But I always find that working it by eye is a lot more effective for me. So we can put that matten layer on there. We have our border. So when we come to put our embellishment on the top, we have it sitting like that. So this could match the inside if you wanted it to. That could be your card finish. You might not even want to put anything on the inside here. That in itself looks really effective if you wanted to do something really super quick and easy. And sometimes, why would you want to even cover up the beautiful papers that you've got on the inside? So you might just want to put your sentiment on there and away you go. You might not want that layer. You might just want the glitter and the sentiment, and I think even that in itself looks lovely. So there's so many different ways that this can happen, and the fact that this opens up as well, I think I really just like that shaped look. I mean, you could almost just plain, you could almost set that off to the side like that, so you have a tiny bit of a border, because these shapes do sort of match and correlate. I think even that works. Again, that's something that you can play with yourself when. It depends what takes your fancy as well, doesn't it, really? I mean, it's you sometimes you start out thinking you'll make one thing, and then next thing you know, you've gone down a completely different route. So that's how you use your edge cuts. That's basically the edge cuts, and that's how you can shape your cardstock and your card blanks. So that's using just 1/2 of the set there. So I'm going to stamp this onto the super smooth cardstock. So I've already got that arranged. I have Lisa's Ultimate, which is the original tool, Ultimate 1, because this is the stamping platform. I will use my magnets just to secure that cardstock in place. So I've lined it up, so if I can bring the lid over, catch the stamp. Now the first one I'll do, I will stamp with Lisa's Cloud 9 solid black ink. Because also what I want to show you is how this is a hybrid ink pad. It takes all that guesswork out of what medium can I use to colour my image with. This works well with both alcohol markers and watercolours, and Lisa has actually put that on the front, so there's no guesswork. It's taken all the guesswork out of stamping and colouring for you. So we can stamp that image. Now it's best to stamp this a couple of times. Make sure that your cardstock and everything is all secure, because you don't want to push this too hard. The stamp itself has got beautiful fine detail, and you don't want to lose that detail by stamping and pressing too hard, because if regardless of the quality of the make of the stamps, if you push too hard with the acrylic stamps, you will have an element of distortion if you press too hard. But that sort of goes without saying, I think, just because of the nature of the material you're using. So I'm going to make sure that I have all images stamped right, and that does mean going in a couple of times. So I have a slight gap there and just here, so I'll just make sure that is caught, and here we'll just stamp again. Now what you may find is that sometimes, depending on the magnets you're using, they may just be that little bit too high, and it might just slightly distort the stamp that the image that you're trying to stamp. So all you need to do is just move your move your magnets out the way, and then you can stamp your image, and it just frees up that area of the stamp image for you, so you can stamp that. So that's looking pretty good, I think. Yeah, we'll leave that as is, I think. So I like to die cut before I colour. So what we can do is bring in our two dies now. You will need some tape for this. You will need your masking tape or low tack tape. And I should probably need another piece. Now this is where you can see how the two dies work together. So basically we've got two halves, which is a really economical way for Lisa to allow one die, as it were, to do two jobs for us. If she were to have joined these at these points here and just given us one die, we wouldn't have had the option to do the edge cuts. But equally, because this isn't a symmetrical image, if we were just given the one for the edge cuts, it meant that we wouldn't be able to cut out the whole thing. So it's a really clever way of one set being able to do two jobs. But it's so easy to line these up. So put the one in place, then we can line up the second. Now the only thing that I would say is that make sure the metal sits side by side. You don't want the metal sitting on top or underneath each other, because when you run that through the die cutting machine, that will just slightly sort of damage the dies a little bit, purely because you'll be the dies will be going through at double the width, won't they? So if you can avoid that, if you can, then that would be ideal. So just take your time and line those up, secure them in place, and then again we can take that through the die cutter machine. So now I have used these dies also through watercolour card, which generally tends to be a little bit thicker than Lisa's Super Smooth, doesn't it? So I probably won't die cut that later on. I shall just stamp and colour, but you have no problem cutting through the watercolour card either. So let me just line that back up. So we remove our tape. You can see that's caught just there, just slightly. As I said, I think that's because I used a newer bit of tape. So we take these away. And again, this time around, you will need a pair of scissors again, because we just need to separate the die. So I'm making that look awkward. Just there we are. So you can see that the die is still caught, and that's at the place where the two dies were lined up against each other. And it is such a tiny little amount, but it's so easy to snip, and it's a convenient place to get your little scissors into, and just a tiny little cut, and that just releases that from the cardstock. And it's so easy to line up and just snip away. Once it's done, you would never know that that was two separate dies together, would you? So what I will do now, I'll just show you how I coloured this with the Copic markers, or any alcohol markers, or even any other colouring mediums you want to use, actually. Again, if you're using something water-based, it might be better to go with a slightly heavier cardstock, or more of a mixed media cardstock. So I'll just put my messy mat on, so I don't mark my silicone mat here. And I've just chosen one of the Copic markers, which closely resembles the colour of the ink and the cardstock that I'll be using on there. And all I'm just doing is colouring, not the flowers, although if you want to colour the flowers, then that would look stunning if you have the time to do that. But this is actually a really quick way of putting colour onto your card, if you do need just a quick card. And we're just colouring all the negative space, basically. So you can even add shading onto this as well, if you had the time to do this. But if colouring is one of those things that really daunts you, and you've put it off and you think, oh, I can't colour, then this really is quite a foolproof way of adding colour, and perhaps easing yourself into using marker pens as well, because even if you go over the line just slightly, you're not going to know. And I think this is a really lovely way to actually bring the image out. And also what it allows you to do is actually come around the edge and give a nice border. So Lisa always gives us a really nice white edge around our die cuts, and some larger than others. But if you can just see, I'm just following the outline of the stamp there. If I bring that up to the camera for you, you'll see that none of the black ink that I've stamped is smudging with the alcohol marker. So you really do have the confidence that Lisa's Cloud9 black ink is perfect to use with alcohol markers. And I'm not being particularly careful and staying away from the edges, and there is still no smudging. So that is really good proof of that. So let me just show you and just go around. Now this is a good alternative also to stamping onto a coloured card, because if you were thinking about it, if you stamp onto the colour card, your image is also going to be coloured. And I think sometimes it's nice just to have that white image, isn't it? Particularly if you're doing a monochrome. Actually, if I finish this for you, you can see actually how quick this really does come about, to be fair. If you're going to sit and colour this and shade all the flowers, it would take an awful lot longer, wouldn't it? Actually, so let me just prove a point, and there we are. Go right down to the edge. So there we are, we have basically a coloured image. Now, if you wanted to go a little bit further and perhaps add some detail on the inside, just like where the flower berries are there, sort of the inside of the flower, just to add a little bit of shading, you can do. It's entirely up to you, but I think for even the most nervous of colourists, I think that is a really nice technique. So that would be ready to sit on the front of your card there. So I've cut myself another piece of Lisa's Super Smooth card. This fits on the matten layers that I have in there. And this time I will stamp that main flower stamp. Right, now there's a couple of ways of doing this. I'm going to use a stamping block, but you still can use your stamping platform. Let me just show you briefly, because what I'll be doing, I won't be using the whole stamp. I'm only really using the flower part. If you wanted to, you can use your stamping block. Because you're using a smaller piece of card, I want to stamp that image there like that. You can take your stamp, ink it up, put it onto your block. You can clean the stamp and then reposition it, turn your card around. So if you do perhaps have sort of issues gripping a stamping block on whatever, which I understand that you can, then that is a good alternative. So what I want to do this time is stamp with the Cloud9, the interference. Now, the one that I've done here, this is the effect that I'm going for. I've used the pink champagne. And as I say, if you had this at home, you would see that there is just that slight glint of the interference colour coming through when you tilt that to the light. But let me try a different colour this time. I might as well. And also, you may have only ever blended with these inks, but they are, being an ink pad, you can stamp with them in their own right. So we just ink our stamp in the way that we would, and this time we are stamping off the page because I really want that random look in the background. And because it is going to be a background, actually, it doesn't necessarily need to be a perfect impression, but you can see how well these inks stamp. And I think sometimes we can get a bit, I think we can forget that we can stamp with different things. I say, because we've got the stencils, we do an awful lot of blending with our inks, but whatever stamps you may have in your stash, it might be worth just sort of giving them a new lease of life with a new ink colour, particularly with these lovely new ink pads. So you can see here that I'm just stamping randomly, and that's, you can see that I don't necessarily need the stem of this image. So we just continue stamping and just fill in the card the best way you can. because you are using a stamping block or whatever, and this is a background image, you can rotate the image to fit and suit. So I think it's a really nice way to use a larger stamp. And sometimes if you want just a quick card, it's easier to pull out one set and think, yes, I can make a whole project with that, and just instead of having to pull everything out, and before you know it, you're becoming indecisive because you think, well, do I use this die? Do I use that die? And then you've made a mess, and what you was hoping would be a quick card because you've perhaps forgotten somebody's birthday or some, sort of turns out into a major project, which you don't always have time for, do you? So this, apart from the sentiment actually, which we don't have in this set, you can pretty much make a whole project. So let me just wipe away the excess ink there, because I will get that everywhere. So there we are, we have a piece of design paper basically to sit in the background. Now, because I'm putting this onto a very similar coloured matten layer, what I want to do is just add a little bit of shading just around the outside. It doesn't need to be a huge amount. For me, again, that's an entirely personal choice. So all I'm doing is taking my blending sponge and just creating a really quick border just along the edge. And that just finishes that off. And because that is slightly thicker and you're adding quite a lot of ink to the edge here, when this dries, that mica will actually be quite evident along this edge, which I think would be really nice, a nice touch. But that is just quick and simple. And again, you can see that I'm building this card as we go along, the same way as it looked at the beginning. Perhaps the colour is slightly off, but I think that works. Now, if that's a little bit too busy for you, the other thing you can do, which I thought would be a really nice idea, just adds a different dimension to this type of shaped card. If that's too much, too busy, I've just taken a piece of vellum, and what you can do, you can just put that on the inside. You can attach that, just simply either a small line of glue or double-sided tape, and you have that vellum feel. And what that does, it takes away some of the boldness of what's on the inside and just gives a really soft card front to the look. Again, that's a completely different design. There's so much you can do with just sort of this one style of card. Again, the other alternative, we can create something different on the inside. We can stencil an image, and what I'll do, I'll use one of these, the art stencils. This one's the tulip doily. I thought I'd go for something a little bit different, and I'll use the pink champagne this time. Now, we do need to use our blending sponges with these. If you wanted something a lot more subtle in the background, a stamped image, or you can use an embossed image. Again, we've got so much, haven't we? We've got so much to choose from. It's really down to what you feel like using on the day, I'd say. So I'm just taking some of that ink off. So I want something really subtle on the inside, and in doing that, it would make that cherry blossom really pop on the outside, wouldn't it? So I just won't, that is really subtle actually. I won't go too much more, but it just gives you an idea. And we can add that on the inside along with a sentiment, or even I have a two-tone stamped sentiment, which you might want to put on as well, which against the white background sort of really picks up the different colours. And I think the last thing that I want to show you is how I just watercoloured the image for you. So I want to show you. So I'm going to get myself a piece of watercolour card or mixed media card. Again, it's a slightly different texture, and it actually does take water very well. So we can line that up. We can use our solid black. Again, that is ideal to be using with watercolours, but I actually want to show you how you can watercolour and just add colour with the interference dyes, because then you have the added bonus of having that little bit of gold mica come through, or the interference colour come through, depending on the ink pad that you're using actually. That. Give that a good press down. So that's stamped really well. There's just one piece there which So that gives, I mean, the interference inks give amazing detail there. So really don't forget that they are a stamping ink also. So I have my watercolour brush, and I'm just going to bring in my messy mat again, because I might want to use that just as a palette and pick up some of this ink. So we don't want to have our brush too wet. We want to just feel that is slightly damp, so we have water sitting in the cartridge here. So all we want to do really is just start pulling out the colour from the stamped line that we have. Now if you find that isn't giving you as much of a bold colour as you would like, don't add more water. I would say pick up more ink and start adding it on that way. That gives a really nice look, and you can actually start painting like this. Now again, watercolouring can be quite scary, but all I'm doing is just using the one colour, and I'm just going to colour the branches and the stems and the leaves going up to the base of the flowers, because that way I don't need to worry about shading of the flowers. Lisa's put an element of shading on the flowers for us anyway with the detail in the stamp, so we don't need to worry about that too much. But just by adding the detail, you can see here I'm picking up the excess ink that I had on my messy mat and just adding that colour there. If you want to add just a tiny bit to the centre of the flowers, you can. That adds a bit of detail. But that really is just a foolhardy way of watercolouring. And it just gets you being familiar with holding a watercolour brush and just how the ink goes down. So that I think is a really lovely image. And as that dries, these larger areas of ink, they will actually start showing the mica from the interference as well. So you'll get the best of both worlds using the ink this way. So that would be die cut again in the same way as we die cut this image before with our two dies. So hopefully I've shown you there's an awful lot of variations and so many ways to use the Edgecutz dies. And if you also sort of bear in mind that Lisa brings out Edgecutz with words as well, and obviously we can't colour them in the same way, but they work in exactly the same way. So we have an awful lot of variations on a clever system, and it gives us lots of ways to actually use those. So hopefully you've enjoyed just revisiting just an older set. Actually, again, it's really nice to go back into the stash and see what we've bought, because when we buy these things we think, we fall in love with them at the time, and then new things come along and we use them instead. So it really is nice just to revisit. And this is still available on the website also, if it's something that you missed out on when it was released, or if you're just new to us and you're not overly familiar with the back catalogue. So I shall love you and leave you. I'll see you again next week. If there's anything in the meantime that you want us to demonstrate, or you're not clear on, do drop us a message in the group, or let Lisa know so we can get something sorted out for you. So enjoy your afternoon and the rest of the week, everyone, and I shall see you next week. Take care.